Soft ambient sound of jet engines, calm music underneath. The narrator speaks with intensity and buildup. Fade in. At 35,000 feet, cruising above the clouds in the nation's most powerful aircraft, Air Force One hummed like a sleeping beast. Inside, all seemed quiet, controlled, presidential. The President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, sat in the main cabin, reviewing briefing papers. Aides whispered, coffee cups clinked softly, no turbulence, no noise, just calm, but calm never lasts. Footsteps echo, heels fast, deliberate, music shifts subtly. Karoline Leavitt, President Trump's firebrand press secretary, stormed down the narrow corridor in her signature navy blazer and crimson heels. Her ponytail bounced with each step, but her expression, laser-sharp focus. She wasn't heading to the media room. She wasn't making a press call. No, she was heading to the cockpit. Sound, metallic door opening abruptly. Tension hits. The cockpit door swung open, slamming softly against the bulkhead. Major John Reynolds, the chief pilot, a decorated Air Force veteran, calm as a glacier, didn't even flinch. Captain Sarah Mitchell, his co-pilot, glanced up from the radar. Eyes narrowed, fingers paused. Major Reynolds, Karoline said, her tone not asking, but declaring. The president has approved a mid-flight change. We need to redirect this plane, now. Reynolds turned slightly, hands still steady on the controls. He looked at her like a general surveying an untested recruit, calm, measured, and absolutely immovable. To where, ma'am? He asked, already knowing the answer. St. Louis, Karoline replied without missing a beat. We'll fly over the city, just a loop. From the sky, we'll film a video. Air Force One is the backdrop. The message? The president is leading America from above. Strong, unshaken, commanding. Pause. The only sound, engine hum and soft radar blips. Reynolds blinked once. Then replied, Not possible, ma'am. Not without FAA clearance. I'm not rerouting. Boom. Just like that, the wall went up. Karoline's eyes narrowed. She stepped forward, arms folded. Major, this is a direct instruction from the president himself. And I serve the president, Reynolds said, still looking ahead, which is exactly why I'm keeping this aircraft on its authorized path. Mitchell didn't speak, but her eyes flicked between the two like she was watching a match about to light gasoline. Karoline wasn't used to hearing no, especially not mid-flight. Especially not when the president had already said yes. But this wasn't about ego. Not today. It was about the moment, the imagery, the message that millions of Americans desperately needed to see. This is bigger than protocol, she said firmly. We're in an economic storm. People are looking for leadership. And nothing says leadership like a shot of Air Force One slicing across the heart of the country with the president speaking from above. Major Reynolds exhaled slowly. Respectfully, ma'am, even from the president, I don't take action without ensuring safety. That's not negotiable at 35,000 feet. To the outside world, Karoline Leavitt is a fighter, a messenger, a lightning rod. But in that cockpit, tight, pressurized, full of blinking lights and military-grade responsibility, she wasn't just fighting for a video. She was fighting to deliver what she promised the president. And right now, Major Reynolds was the one man standing between her and that promise. Sound, cockpit ambience, radar beeping, low drone of engines, music builds in tension. The narrator picks up right where the last left off. Karoline didn't blink. She didn't flinch. Not when Major Reynolds threw up the wall. Not possible, ma'am, he'd said, his voice steady, controlled. But Karoline Leavitt had never been one to take not possible as a final answer. She took one step closer, her red heels clicking on the cockpit floor like a gavel coming down in court. Her arms crossed, her gaze locked on him. Major, this isn't a suggestion, she said, her voice sharp but composed. It's a directive from the President of the United States, and I am the one executing it. Beat. Music tightens. Reynolds didn't even turn his head. His eyes were on the horizon, hands on the controls, calm as the clouds outside. Ma'am, he said, voice low and unshaken, even the president can't change airspace protocol mid-flight without FAA clearance. We are not a campaign bus. We're flying the most powerful man in the world. That means safety comes first, always. And this is safety, Karoline shot back. This message, this video, is strategic. It's leadership. We're not asking to land on a runway, just a loop, 5 minutes over St. Louis. The people will see their president leading from the sky. Captain Mitchell shifted in her seat but said nothing. Her fingers hovered over the radar screen, tension evident in every subtle movement. "I don't fly based on optics, ma'am," Reynolds replied. "I fly based on radar and clearance. And right now, you have neither." Nair interjects, tone lowers. This wasn't just a disagreement. It was a deadlock between two professionals at the peak of pressure, each carrying the weight of a nation, but from opposite ends. For Karoline, it was about momentum. The world outside was crumbling, markets unstable, morale low. America needed a symbol, a message, a shot from the sky, bold and uncompromising. For Reynolds, it was about responsibility. One wrong call, and the president's plane becomes tomorrow's headlines, for all the wrong reasons. Back in scene. Karoline's voice rises, sharper now. "You're blocking the president's vision," she said, her voice taut with frustration. "You're not just denying me, you're denying him. Do you understand the optics of that?" Reynolds turned to her slowly for the first time. Not with anger, but with iron will. "Do you understand the consequences of improvising at 35,000 feet over a major city?" he said. "This isn't a PR stunt. This is Air Force One. We fly by the book." Karoline's jaw tightened. She could feel the pressure building behind her eyes, not from defeat, but from being unheard. She had fought tooth and nail to gain the president's trust. She had promised him this moment, and now it was slipping through her fingers. All because of one man gripping a control stick. "You think this is about publicity?" she snapped. "This is about leadership. I was tasked with delivering a message, and I'm delivering it. You're standing in the way of that." The cockpit felt smaller now, the air heavier. The hum of the engines came a background drumbeat to a standoff no one expected, certainly not at 35,000 feet. But Karoline? She wasn't backing down. Not now. Not with the nation watching. She leaned in slightly, her voice low, dangerous. "Let me be clear, Major. I will take full responsibility. If this gets complicated, if the FAA needs to follow up, I'll handle it. You don't need to carry the fallout, but right now the president needs this moment, and I need you to make it happen." Beat Reynolds slowly shakes his head. "That's the problem," he said quietly. "You think pressure can override protocol. It can't. Not here. Not on my watch." "Then what is your job, Major?" Karoline snapped, her composure cracking just slightly. "Because right now, it looks like you're more worried about paperwork than presidential power." "My job," Reynolds said, now facing her directly, "is to make sure this plane lands with everyone alive, including the man you serve." Pause. Silence. Then, Karoline lowers her voice again. "If you won't reroute, then you're responsible for what comes next," she said. "Because I'm going to tell the president you refused a direct order, and I promise you, he won't take that lightly." Music swells into cliffhanger note. Reynolds didn't flinch, didn't blink. He simply said, "Then bring him." Karoline stared at him. A long, quiet moment passed. Then, with a final look, half fire, half fury, she turned and walked out of the cockpit, heels pounding with purpose. And just like that, the cockpit door slammed shut. Sound, footsteps, the soft but unmistakable click of polished shoes on the floor of Air Force One. The door handle turns, slowly. The cockpit door swung open with a soft creak. But to Karoline Leavitt, it sounded like the gates of judgment had just been thrown wide. Standing in the doorway, filling it with presence alone, was Donald J. Trump, in a deep navy suit, white shirt, and a bold red tie that practically cut the air around him. He didn't look angry. He didn't look pleased either. He just looked. His eyes scanned the cockpit like a general entering the war room. Cool, controlled, commanding. "Major," he said, voice deep and even. "I hear there's a situation up here?" Slightly amused, but suspenseful. That's how Trump operated. Never flustered, never loud, just pressure that filled every inch of space and made grown men forget their own names. Karoline stood tall beside him, chin up, jaw clenched. She wasn't backing down now. "Sir," she said, voice calm but firm. "I briefed you earlier. We had an opportunity to send a powerful message to the nation, flying over St. Louis, recording a statement with Air Force One behind you. You signed off on it." She glanced toward Major Reynolds, her voice tightening. "But the pilot here has refused to reroute, even after being informed that it's a direct instruction." Trump turns to Reynolds. Beat of silence. Reynolds rose from his seat, not out of fear, but out of respect. He stood tall, meeting Trump eye to eye, without a flicker of hesitation. Mr. President, Reynolds said, voice level, I'm not refusing you. I'm refusing the timing. We don't have FAA clearance. St. Louis airspace is congested. Commercial flights, military aircraft. One wrong turn, one missed signal, and we're in a collision zone. Trump doesn't react right away, just studies him. Then turns to Karoline. Karoline, he said, using her full name. Only he could make that sound both affectionate and stern. You said I approved this, and I did. I love the idea. Big, bold. But the major says it's too risky. What's the story? Karoline didn't stammer. She never stammered. Sir, you trusted me to deliver a moment that would wake this country up. This flyover would have done that. I made that promise to you, and now it's being blocked, not because it's impossible, but because of hesitation. She pointed toward Reynolds, not accusing, challenging. He's not saying no to me. He's saying no to you. Reynolds spoke before the air could freeze. With respect, sir, I'm saying no to risk. You trusted me to fly this plane, to keep you alive. That's my oath. I don't take it lightly, not even for a great idea. Narrator voice drops to a hush, tension builds. For a moment, no one spoke. Even Captain Mitchell held her breath. It was the kind of silence that only existed in two places: a courtroom after a verdict, or a cockpit when the president stares you down. Trump moves forward slowly, two fingers tapping the metal doorframe. So let me get this straight, he said. You're saying we can't do it, not because you won't, but because it's not safe? That's right, Mr. President, Reynolds answered. Then answer me this, Trump said, leaning slightly forward, eyes narrowed. Can you make it safe? Music shifts, tension but now curiosity. Reynolds paused. The room held its breath. Then, with all the weight of experience behind his words, he said, Not right now, sir. We'd need time. FAA coordination. A clean window in the sky. I can give you your flyover, just not mid-flight without prep. Trump went quiet, and then he did the last thing anyone expected. He smirked. Narrator softens, slightly amused, that signature Trump smirk, the one you saw right before a deal was struck or a chess piece moved. He turned to Karoline. You've got fire, he said. I like that. I want the message. I want the moment. He looked back to Reynolds. But I don't want the plane falling out of the sky. Figure it out. He patted Karoline's shoulder, then stepped back. Just like that. Trump left the cockpit. Sound. Door closing. Echoes through silence. Karoline stood there for a second. The fire in her eyes hadn't faded, but something else had entered. Reality. Respect. Reflection. Reynolds returned to his seat. Mitchell exhaled quietly. The pressure had dropped, but the challenge had only begun. Narrator closes the chapter with energy. Karoline Leavitt had just faced down the toughest pilot in the sky, and her own president, and neither had said no to her idea. But both had reminded her of something she hadn't planned for. You don't win on Air Force One by pushing harder. You win by playing smarter. Sound, soft ambient cabin noise. Music, reflective piano with subtle strings. Karoline's footsteps softer now. Karoline stood in the corridor outside the cockpit, the door now closed behind the president. Trump's words echoed in her mind, sharp, measured, final. Figure something else out. Soft, introspective. He didn't say drop it. He didn't say stand down. No, he did something far harder. He trusted her to lead without giving her what she wanted. That's when it hit her. This wasn't about power anymore. It was about persuasion. And real leadership doesn't force, it adapts. Karoline takes a breath, soft sound of her hand on the cockpit door handle. She opens it again, but slower this time. Major Reynolds looked up as she entered, his eyes cautious. Captain Mitchell paused, her hand on the radar. But this time, Karoline didn't storm in. No pointed fingers, no raised voice, just resolve, and something rarer, humility. She stepped forward quietly. Major, she began, voice lower now, I want to apologize. That stopped the cockpit cold. I came in here earlier like a hurricane, she continued, pushing, demanding. Because yes, I'm under pressure. I promised the president something big, and when he expects, I deliver. That's who I am. She paused, hands clasped in front of her. But I forgot something important. You're not just a pilot. You're a guardian of this aircraft, of everyone on it, including the president. I get that now. Narrator, it wasn't weakness. It wasn't surrender. It was strategic vulnerability. Karoline Leavitt wasn't backing down. She was stepping up by meeting Reynolds on his battlefield. Responsibility. Reynolds shifts in his seat. The tension in his shoulders eases, just slightly. Miss Leavitt, he said, tone more measured. I respect your dedication. I really do, but I hope you understand, I wasn't trying to sabotage anything. I've flown through war zones, typhoons, and moments more intense than this. My job never changes. Get the president home safe. Karoline nodded. Her eyes locked with his, steady now, not fiery, but focused. And I'm not asking you to compromise that, she said. I just need to find a way to adapt, a way to still send the message without forcing a change that puts us all at risk. She looked between Reynolds and Mitchell. So I'm asking, not ordering, is there any way we can get a powerful shot, something the president can stand behind, without rerouting over St. Louis? Music begins to lift. For the first time, Mitchell spoke up. Her voice was calm, but filled with possibility. Actually, maybe yes. She tapped the radar. Our current flight path takes us over a vast plain in about 20 minutes. It's open, clear, beautiful terrain below. If you film from the main cabin with the window angled right, you might get the kind of backdrop you're looking for. We stay safe. No reroute needed. Karoline leaned in. Can we lower altitude slightly for a better visual? Reynolds glanced at Mitchell, then nodded. Within limits. Yes, I'll adjust altitude just enough to give you that shot. Still within FAA parameters. Safe. No clearance required. Karoline smiled, this time not out of triumph, but gratitude. That's all I needed, she said softly. A way forward. Together. She didn't conquer the cockpit by outshouting anyone. She earned respect by doing something far more powerful, listening, adjusting, and leading with trust. As she turned to leave, Karoline paused at the door, then looked back at Reynolds. You're stubborn, Major, she said with a grin. But I guess that's what makes you great at your job. Reynolds gave a rare smirk. You're not so bad yourself, Miss Leavitt, and I'll admit, your idea? It's growing on me. Music lifts, hopeful but still full of momentum. The battle had shifted. The air was lighter. The mission was still alive. Not over St. Louis, but maybe something even better. Sound, calm but steady ambient airplane noise. The mood is now focused, energized. Strings swell lightly underneath. As Karoline stepped out of the cockpit, something had changed, not just in the air pressure, but in her presence. Gone was the storming press secretary, charging down hallways in red heels. In her place, a strategist with a plan, and a team finally moving in sync. She walked with purpose, but this time, she wasn't alone. Back in the cockpit, Captain Mitchell was already scanning the radar, fingers dancing across the screen. And then, there it was. We've got a window, Mitchell said over the comms. A wide-open plain coming up in 18 minutes. Sunlight's perfect. No cloud cover. It's not St. Louis, but it's America. Bold and wide as it gets. Karoline's voice came through the speaker, clear and sharp. I'll take it. I'll take it. Let's make it happen. Reynolds chimed in. I'll lower altitude within safe range, just enough to get you closer to the ground. Nothing risky, but it'll give you the visual you want. And just like that, mission rebooted. This wasn't the original plan. It wasn't the grand St. Louis flyover with city lights and news headlines waiting to explode. But maybe it was better. Because this moment, it wasn't fueled by pressure. It was built on collaboration. Real leadership. Real trust. Cut to Karoline moving through the cabin now, focused fast. Ryan, she called to her assistant, who nearly dropped his iPad. Get the camera ready. Window seat, left side. I want natural light, a clean sky, and a full view of the wing. Ma'am? He stuttered, scrambling with a tripod. Tripod. We don't have a script. What are you going to say? Karoline looked out the window. The sky stretched endlessly, blue, brilliant, alive. She didn't hesitate. I don't need a script, she said. I've got the moment. That's what made Karoline different. She didn't wait for perfect conditions. She created them. And now, she had the tools, the backdrop, the permission, and the fire. Reynolds' voice crackles on the intercom. Approaching the window, lowering altitude now. We've got 45 seconds until peak angle. Copy that, Karoline replied. Camera rolling in 30. Ryan fumbled with the lens, adjusted the focus, hands shaking. Karoline smoothed her blazer, adjusted her high ponytail, and took position by the window, her silhouette framed by sunlight and sky. Music builds to crescendo. Ma'am, Ryan whispered, you sure about this? One take? She looked straight into the camera, eyes sharp, voice calm. Ryan, I was born for one take. He hit record. Silence. Then action. My fellow Americans, she began, voice steady, commanding, real. Today, President Trump leads not just from Washington, but from above this great nation. As we cross its heartland, we face challenges head on: inflation, fear, division, but we do not waver, because leadership doesn't run, it rises. Outside the window, the wing of Air Force One glinted in the sun. Clouds rolled beneath. The American land stretched for miles. This is not a moment of spectacle, Karoline continued. It's a signal. We are in motion. We are working. And we are united. Cut to Ryan, his jaw slightly dropped. The recording is flawless. She wrapped it in under a minute. No fluff, no hesitation. As the plane cruised forward, Ryan hit stop. "We got it," he breathed. "We really got it." Karoline turned toward him with the smallest smile, not one of pride, of confirmation. The moment she needed, it was done. She walked calmly to Trump's seat, handed him the iPad. "Sir," she said, "it's not over St. Louis, but it might be even better." The president watched the video silently, then smiled, slow, approving. "You figured it out," he said. "That's what I hired you for." Karoline nodded once. Mission delivered. But this time, it wasn't power that got her there. It was partnership. With Reynolds, with Mitchell, with the skies above and the people below. Sometimes, when the plan falls apart, the real victory begins. Sound the faint hum of Air Force One cruising. Camera beeps. Recording ends. Silence lingers. Ryan slowly lowered the camera. His hands were still trembling, not from nerves now, but adrenaline. The cabin was quiet. No applause, no celebration, just that electric silence after something big has happened. Karoline stood still, her silhouette outlined by the glow of sunlight pouring through the aircraft window. Her voice still echoed in the cabin. Leadership doesn't run, it rises. And she had risen, not by brute force, not by politics, but by adapting, by leading. The video was raw, powerful, and cinematic without trying to be. Just Karoline. A nation. A message from the clouds. Cut to Karoline walking down the aisle of Air Force One, heels steady, eyes focused. She approaches Trump's seat, the iPad in her hands. She said, calm and poised, "It's done." Trump looked up from his briefing papers, raised a brow. She handed him the screen. He hit play. For 42 seconds, no one in the main cabin breathed. Trump watched. No reaction. His face unreadable. Then, at the final line, he leaned back, eyes still on the screen, and smirked. "Good work, Karoline," he said, voice deep and approving. "You nailed it." Pause. Karoline nods slightly. That was the only validation she needed. He didn't need to say more. That one sentence was a medal of honor. Cut to cockpit. Mitchell glances at Reynolds. The tension that once filled the space had lifted like fog burning off in sunlight. "She did it," Mitchell said, barely above a whisper. Reynolds didn't speak at first. It just nodded, eyes on the endless blue outside. "Yeah," he said finally, "and we're still in the sky." The two shared a brief glance. Nothing dramatic, just silent, mutual respect. Thoughtful, grounded. That's the part no one sees in a press clip. Not the argument, not the risk, but the balance. Karoline had learned that it wasn't about getting your way. It was about getting it done, without compromising the very thing you're supposed to protect. Cut to Ryan in the cabin uploading the video. The moment hits the cloud, hits the networks, hits the nation. Within minutes, it's trending. From above, Trump's team sends powerful message mid-flight. Karoline doesn't celebrate. She just watches the numbers climb in silence. She knows the public sees confidence, strength, precision. What they don't see? The part where she almost lost control, and the part where she chose to listen instead. Back to cockpit. Reynolds pulls a small notepad from his flight jacket, writes a single line. "Held the line. She found the way." He tucks it back into his chest pocket. Mitchell smiles faintly. "Think she's got what it takes?" Reynolds chuckles. "She's got fire," he says. "But now she's learning how to fly with it." Cut back to Karoline, sitting alone by the window, watching the clouds drift by below. Reflective music plays beneath. The president was pleased. The nation was watching. But she wasn't thinking about views or praise. She was thinking about what came next. Because this wasn't a one-time win. It was a reminder of what real pressure feels like and what it means to bend without breaking. St. Louis never happened, but the moment did. And she made it happen the right way. Honoring line steady. On Air Force One, altitude isn't the only thing that rises. Sometimes, so does character.